The Adventures of Batman with Robin, Boy Wonder. Batman and Robin, dynamic duo against crime and corruption, whose real identities as millionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne and his young ward Dick Grayson are known only to Alfred, the faithful butler. Ever alert, they respond swiftly to a signal from the police, and moments later, from the secret Batcave deep beneath Wayne Manor, they roar out to protect life, limb, and property as Batman and Robin, Cape Crime Fighters. Batman and Robin, scourge of Gotham City's kooky criminals. The Joker, clown prince of crime. The Penguin, pudgy purveyor of perfidy. And the cool, cruel Mr. Freeze. Watch out, villains. Here come Batman and Robin.
Welcome back, citizens, to an all-new episode of the Batcave podcast. It's your old bat chum, John S. Drew here, and, you know, I can't get this reviewing thing out of my blood. It's just, I don't know what it is, and I'm already getting, like, you know, a little bit of withdrawal symptoms from not being able to review 66 episodes. But, you know, as we were finishing up the series, I was watching the Batman 1969 animated Filmation series there, and I said to myself as I was watching it, wow, there are so many things here that clearly are taken directly from the Batman 66 series. And I said, you know what? Let's talk about these. Let's keep this rolling here in terms of reviews. So for the next couple of months, you know, mixed in with other special episodes that we'll be doing here, we're going to be reviewing these episodes. But rather than trying to get people together to talk about maybe a cartoon they haven't seen in many, many years, I figured let me get someone here who knows these Filmation cartoons, who's a fan of them, and who appreciates what they offer as much as I've been appreciating them as I watch them. So I want to welcome, for this run of these review episodes, Mr. Dan Greenfield from 13thdimension.com. Hey, Dan.
Hey, John. How are you?
I'm good. But now let me ask you, you know, because you jumped at this. You
yes.
And you were also very specific in saying, and if you're doing the 70s one, don't count on me.
Correct.
Now,
yes.
What is it about, obviously, Batmite is a problem, but
that
what
is
is
the
it
problem.
that distinguishes, it's a big problem, yeah.
That's the problem.
That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I love these cartoons. I remember these so clearly from when I was a kid. Not necessarily specific episodes, but just watching the show. In growing up around in New Jersey, but in the New York area, they used to be on Channel 5. And I don't think I thought of them necessarily as an extension of Batman 66, but it was all part of the same zeitgeist. I mean, it's clearly, and as we go along, it's absolutely clear that the live action show had an impact on this. You know, they definitely took their cues from it, which makes sense. The show had been popular. There's a lot of shared references and concepts. And as we know, the TV show overshadowed how popular culture thought of Batman for decades. So it only went to follow that the first cartoon that featured Batman was going to be very similar in tone. The 77 show, I actually went back and tried to watch some of it, but the Batmite stuff was far too distracting. And I love fun. I know what fun is. That's not fun. And I couldn't watch it. And even though there are some improvements that they made, like for example, Catwoman in the 77 show is better than the one in the 69-70 show. A vast improvement, even down to that outfit, which is pretty cool. I just can't watch those shows, and I maybe I'll go back again, and maybe I'll change my mind. But I've never been a fan of like the mascot, other than Tusky the Walrus in Aquaman.
Right.
And whatever his name is in Space Ghost. I've never been a big fan of the animal sidekick. Who I don't know. That kind of comic relief I never liked it even when I was a kid. I always thought it was distracting. So.
In going back, I watched a couple of episodes of the 77 show, but I think I'm going to be doing reviews of those only because Adam and Bert did the voices. But something else that also stood out compared to the 69 version, they never throw a punch.
Yeah, by then they had really actually there are a few things that are noteworthy as we go through into these episodes that you'll see that definitely change. That was a big thing, and even in Lou Scheimer's book, producer of Filmation, one of the main producers, got into is how much pressure they were under to tone down the violence in their adventure shows, and even though they were not violent, even by I think reasonable standards at the time, the late '60s, they're even going as late as the Batman animated series in the '90s. If you listen to the commentaries on those shows, there was always a lot of talk of exactly what they could show and what they couldn't show. They could show the throwing of the punch, they could throw the aftermath of the punch, but they couldn't show the punch hitting someone. Mm-hmm. And you see that a lot in the '69-'70 show. But Filmation, I know, was very mindful of the level of violence on their shows, and it actually goes to a lot of that has to do with what they ended up, they moved away from a lot of the DC stuff at the end of the '60s and started moving more into live action fare. They started doing different things. Filmation we think of as doing superhero cartoons and a few other things and some live action things here and there, but they did a ton of stuff, and I mean a ton of stuff from their heyday until they finally faded out. But actually, while we're talking, I would encourage your listeners to pick up the book on Filmation by Lou Scheimer. It's a memoir. It was ghostwritten by a different writer, but it's really, really, really good. And it covers not only just these cartoons and the other DC cartoons, but live action stuff like Shazam and pretty much everything else they did. It's really good.
Now, when they did this, it was Superman first, then Superman with Aquaman, and then Superman with Batman.
Yep. And they mixed in, particularly during Superman and Aquaman, they had a series of 18 shorts featuring other characters that they would mix in. So, for example, you would have Superman and Aquaman, but then in the middle maybe there would be The Atom, or they would have the Teen Titans, which was one of my favorites, or Green Lantern. And I didn't see any of those until I was, I wouldn't say an adult, but I was like an older kid, or maybe, years later, because my recollection was, and any listeners can correct me on this, that it used to run, when it did run on Channel 5 in New York. I don't know where it was in, obviously other parts of the country, but it was Batman, Aquaman, Batman. And that was like the show. It's like they would have a Batman segment, an Aquaman segment, and a Batman segment. And later, I started seeing these other ones pop up. Like Superman, I didn't see in Filmation until maybe, the period I'm talking about, I'm sorry, I should specify, was around 1972 in syndication.
Right.
Later on, say 77, 8, 79, 80, around there, that's when I started seeing the Superman and Superboy cartoons. But it wasn't until later that even after that, I think that I started seeing, maybe it was around that time, I don't know, that I started seeing the other shorter ones. So those ones are great. The ones with the Atom and the Flash, and some of those are fantastic. But as far as the Batman ones were the ones that I really focused on, and it was the kind of thing that, of course, before iTunes, before DVDs and all of that, it kind of, all of the Filmations kind of vanished. They went away. They weren't available, and it wasn't only until a few years ago that Warner's Archives decided to make them all available. And actually at 13th Dimension, I wrote this. They never really released all of them the same way. Some were available for download, some were available on disc, and right now I actually don't even know what's available and what's not to people. I do know that Batman and Robin are at least available on disc. Even if it's not in print right now, you can get it fairly inexpensively, I think, and it may still be available on iTunes. Do you happen to know?
I don't know about the digital versions. I do know that the discs are available for Batman, Superman, all 3 seasons.
Right.
Seasons 2 and 3 were combined into one disc set. The shorts with the Titans and the Justice League and such, that's all one collection.
You're right. I think they have actually released them all on disc now. Well, that's true.
I don't know about Aquaman. That's the only one I don't know.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
I think they have, but either way, it's gettable. While we are sitting here, I'll look up Batman and Robin. We can keep talking. We can let people know if it's available on iTunes.
I do remember that. You're right. The Superman ones didn't come until later, but they never did run the shorts for whatever reason, the other ones, the extra ones on the Channel 5 one. I don't think those got shown, or if they even did, when USA Network picked up the run for a while there. They were showing them with these weird new openings.
Presenting the world's greatest superhero.
Up and away!
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings in a single bound.
This is a job for Superman.
It's Superman, the Man of Steel. Batman and Robin.
To the Batmobile.
Protect Gotham City from crime and corruption. The dynamic duo and Batgirl. Battling Gotham's most fiendish criminals. Watch out, villains. Here comes Batman. And the Super Friends. Aquaman, King of the Seven Seas. Wonder Woman, the amazing Amazon. And the Justice League of America fight for peace and justice for all mankind. These are the Superman Batman adventures.
No, they did. Yeah, they had the weird new openings. They did show them. And I think around the time, because you and I are about the same age, so I think in the late 70s, early 80s when they were on, because I had definitely seen them. I'd seen The Flash with Blue Bolt, and I'd seen Green Lantern with Evil Star. I was very much aware of them because years later when Saturday Night Live did the satire of the ambiguously gay duo, they were based on these cartoons.
Right.
And specifically, there's a Green Lantern cartoon that basically rips off a bunch of the images from one of the Green Lantern cartoons, and I'd seen it. So, but nevertheless, the point being is that for a long time, it was one of those things. I was like, did I actually see that, or did I imagine that? Because they were just gone. They were gone for years. But in any event, I loved these cartoons. I loved the Batman cartoons. They were exciting in some respects. I felt that they were a little bit more serious than the TV show. Yeah. It is available on iTunes, by the way. I am looking right now. You can buy the whole season, and here they are right on my screen. So yes, listeners, you can get them on iTunes. Cool. But yeah, I thought that they were terrific. I thought, I thought that they were entertaining. Even watching them now, not all of them are as good as I remember them being, for sure, but they're still really entertaining.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely, in going through these, there's some that aren't as good as others. There's also times where I get a little frustrated that certain characters I feel are actually overused, as we see with even this first episode. In particular, I know this is going to sound sacrilegious, Joker and Penguin.
It's not sacrilegious. In fact, they really relied on the two of those characters. And as the series goes along, and as we'll get to, they did try to introduce other villains. You did see, we do get to see the Scarecrow. We never got on the TV show. Mm-hmm. They tried to create their own version of a King Tut, or an Egghead with their own couple of themed villains that they invented for the series. Most notably Simon the Pie Man.
Yeah, I liked him.
There are a couple of very, very funny episodes, unintentionally funny episodes with him. And his I guess she's supposed to be his Russian henchwoman.
Yes.
It's just kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, there you go. No, I have really fond memories of these cartoons, watching them when in growing up, and even as we go, and we'll discuss, there are other influences that I've noted that I didn't even realize how it influenced me on certain things. But I'm ready when you are.
Okay, so let's talk about the first of the two episodes. See, every episode had, this was also interesting, a two-part story and then a singular story. And it's kind of funny because I almost liken it to, the two-parter is Batman 66, the TV show, and the one-parter could almost be Batman 66, the comic book, because it's just this short thing, not a lot happens, and yet at the same time, things do happen that are pretty cool.
Yeah, I actually was thinking of the Batman 66 comic book too as I was watching these, and I was also reminded, when at New York Comic Con, and you have the audio, in your feed because you played it for as one of your episodes. When I interviewed the producers of the Batman 66 animated movie, I asked them a question about how do you maintain the tone of the TV show when you're dealing with animation. In other words, one of the things that made the TV show what it was the fact that it was people in real life doing what they were doing. It wasn't on a comic book page. It wasn't animation. The comedy came just by the fact that it was real people doing it. And how does that translate when you're going back to, animation or a comic book? Can that tone be translated? And in the Batman 66 comic book, I think that the tone translated pretty well for the most part. Most of the writers got it. Some of them not as well, or some of them were a little bit more uneven. I think, obviously, as we discussed on the animated movie, they nailed it. And in here, it's kind of a hybrid because I think it's intentional. They definitely went down the road of a lot of the same hokiness, but it wasn't. These are not campy per se because they are written for kids. Mm-hmm. There's no second level to the joke for adults. There's no expectation that adults are watching. So while a lot of those elements are there from the show, they're not there. Other elements are not. And when you say like watching this and thinking of it like the comic book, it's sort of the same thing in the sense that it's like, you know what, that doesn't translate as well to, or certainly for adult eyes. Remember, these were done for kids. We're watching these again, and I'm going to be, actually by the time your listeners hear this, I'll be 50. So you're definitely watching them with adult eyes. But as a kid, I'm not sure that kids were picking up on the differences because all of the things that we loved about the show as kids are still present in these cartoons.
A series of bizarre happenings occur in the world of sport at a track meet. At the Gotham Country Club golf tournament. In the stands, millionaire Bruce Wayne and his ward Dick Grayson look at one another, deeply concerned.
Dick, this appears to be the work of the Penguin.
But why sports events?
That's what we must find out. Come on.
Yeah, all right. So let's talk about the first part, the two-parter here. It was called My Crime is Your Crime, written by Dennis Marks. Now, this very first episode aired September 13th, 1969. And we open with Bruce and Dick deciding to go investigate as Batman and Robin the strange happenings at sporting events where sports equipment suddenly open up as umbrellas. And it's a cute little opening there with a montage of scenes and such. And we learned that the equipment comes from the Emperor's Sporting Goods. And this is where I got my first feel that this was something Batman 66, even though I know they've probably done it in the comic books time and time again. I've been slowly making my way reading some of the old issues and such. But the connection they make that the Emperor's Sporting Goods, Emperor Penguin, so this must be the Penguin.
Yes, that is as you put it. As I was watching it too, I was thinking, there's John's Gotham City logic. They're right away. And yes, you're right. The thing about the show, the live action show that played, they were satirizing just those very elements where Batman and Robin in the comics, particularly the ones that were made before, even a few years before the show came out. Really you're talking the comics that were made from the mid 50s to the early 60s. Before 1964, that was commonplace. That just over the top, they make these leaps that only they could make, and the use of the fact that there were always thematic places for these things to, not only just the fact that the villain would have a thematic crime wave, but that those places even existed for them to plunder. So, and Emperor Sporting Goods, Emperor Penguin, of course that exists. It has to exist because in that world that would exist. Of course, it's in the real world, that's not a bad name for a sporting goods company. But yes, the fact that they create the dots and then connect them is a very Batman 66 thing to do.
Yeah. And it's in this scene in the Batcave as they're working this all out that we get the first of what are going to be many reverse R's or R in the wrong place. In this case, it's on the, I guess you'd say the right-hand side?
Yeah, on Robin's R. Yeah, I love that. That absolutely. I'm so glad you mentioned that because that is one of my absolute favorite elements of the Filmation cartoons because these things were done so fast. I mean, the animation. Actually, the animation in these are an improvement over the animation that you saw in Superman and you saw in a lot of the various superhero shorts. Aquaman a little different. The Aquaman and it's interesting going back to the Scheimer book. He talks about how much care they took with Aquaman. Aquaman is really a very nice looking cartoon. Those backgrounds are gorgeous. The different fish are gorgeous. The villains, sometimes look really silly, but overall it's really a nice looking cartoon. This actually has a lot of, pardon the phrase, dynamism in it. So just as a side note about the animation. But still, it's very cheap animation. It's not what you see today or what we've grown accustomed to seeing now. This was during that, if you will, the golden age of schlock animation. So they made mistakes, off-model mistakes, all the time. There's another one, not to spoil anything, as I noticed when watching some of these episodes where Batman's walking around. For some reason, he has no glove on, or Robin has no glove. I mean, how do you not even draw the glove? I mean, it's one thing if you get the color wrong, but there's just no glove. It's just his arm is bare. And that was also one of the things that I actually carried over when they went on to Scooby-Doo. I know that you're going to do that later. In Scooby-Doo, the same thing would happen. And as a kid, that drove me crazy. I was like, no, that's messed up. Now it makes me cackle. And I was so glad that in the Batman 66 animated movie that they did that a few times, just to screw with the audience, just as a wink to say, yeah, we remember that stuff too. And also, there's an episode of the Brave and the Bold cartoon where they satirize their appearance on Scooby-Doo, and the same thing, like the logos will flip, or something will be missing on their outfit. It's those little details that also make these things so endearing.
Yeah. Now, I gotta ask, though, because this isn't Gotham City Logic. This must be, definitely Saturday morning cartoon type thing. We learned that the Penguin has a regular hideout. We'll see it throughout this series. It's a giant nest on top of a hill or a plateau or something. And I'm like, why didn't Batman and Robin just always go there first whenever they suspected the Penguin?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. That's like everybody knows where the Penguin lives. Well, hey, why don't we go over where the Penguin lives? Also, the fact that these guys are constantly this is the same thing with the TV show, too, but they're constantly, especially since they're used more often, they go to jail for maybe a hot minute, and then they're back out again. Right. And they never show. I mean, occasionally, I guess they show them breaking out. They're actually in one episode. That's actually part of the plot. But it's, for the most part, it's like, oh, most of the Penguin's back. Well, okay, he's here. Let's go get him, but not go back to his lair.
Yeah. And I did also notice. I don't know, because you said they did a lot of cartoons at the time, Filmation. They also did a lot of live action and such. The Bat computers in the Batcave, all the background computers and stuff, all look suspiciously like the computers from Fantastic Voyage.
You have me there because I know this is really a damage to my mid-century geek credibility, as it were. I've never seen it.
Really?
I've always wanted to see, I've seen parts of it. I've always wanted to see it. I haven't seen it. So it's entirely possible that that's the case. I just couldn't comment on it. I can comment on the fact that I think it's funny that when they use the Bat computer, they're still using the whole punch cards that they used in the 66 series.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, no, Fantastic Voyage, my God. I mean, one of the best theme songs ever for a cartoon, and just a great show. It was a shame it only lasted one season.
Wow. Yeah, no, there's a lot, there are a lot of things that people have mentioned now that would play in other parts of the country that I never saw growing up. I mean, you'd think in New York we would have seen everything. Right. Not to sound snobbish, but it is the media capital, so you'd think that everything would show up. And maybe some of it did, but in those few years when I was, addicted to cartoons on television, certain things were on and certain things were not. Or if they were on, maybe they were on at a different time. Like some kids I knew who watched cartoons before school. I never watched cartoons before school, so maybe it was on then. So there you go. Maybe I always watched cartoons after school, but not before school. So I'm sure that there was stuff that I missed there. And then also, if I'm watching Gilligan's Island, maybe on another channel, I was unaware that something else was going on. And also, it just could be the fact that, because even shows like this with Batman and Batman 66, they weren't running constantly. There were periods when they weren't on TV at all. And of course, you'd go a little crazy because I want to watch that, but you couldn't because you didn't have the option to just turn it on yourself. Same thing goes with the Spider-Man 67 cartoons. And if you ever decide you want to do a podcast about that, count me in. Because my God, that's actually my all-time favorite cartoon is the 1967 Spider-Man cartoons. I love them. But be that as it may, Yeah, there are definitely some things out there, and I know this isn't really about this episode, but it would be interesting, to go down sometimes what are the things that you remember versus what are the things that I remember, because sometimes all the difference is what channel you were watching or what time you were watching it.
Right, yeah. Well, Fantastic Voyage was definitely a morning show. I remember that. That was like
See, there
before
you go.
school. Yeah. So... All right, so they get a tip that Penguin's going to steal this jeweled belt, so they head off to the sporting goods company in order to stop him before it happens. I guess they figure a conspiracy, conspiring to steal is enough to nail him on?
Yeah, that's the other thing, is that they don't always wait for real probable cause. They just go by their hunch.
Yeah.
To be fair, the writers do sometimes Batman and Robin overstep and they get into trouble for it, but for the most part, yeah. I mean, it's like playing cops and robbers in the back, or Batman and Robin in the backyard. Someone's going to commit a crime, that's good enough, so they go after him and beat the tar out of them.
Right. and yeah, sure enough, a bat fight, and I'm calling it a bat fight even though it's not really a bat fight because it doesn't have the music. I mean, in many respects, it's more like the comic books because they even get quips and jokes in while they're doing it.
Now, my sporting birds, stand ready for the big game.
Sure, sounds okay to me. Sorry, Penguin, the game's been called.
Ow! Fly at them, bird brains!
Duck, Robin.
He's getting away!
Head him off with your batarang.
Roger! No, go away!
Come along, Penguin. You can complain to the police commissioner.
Yeah, exactly. They get to, yeah, exactly. And that's also where some of the humor that's similar to Batman 66. There's a lot of puns. There's a lot of, you fiend, kind of things going on. But I love the way that they would stage the fights. I mean, even if they didn't show, and it's, I don't care if they show fist to face. I mean, I'm not a sadist, but they do a really good job of stylizing it specifically for this show. There are a few things that they do really well. One is when they show the throwing of the batarang, particularly where Robin throws it to the screen.
Yep, I've got that.
The way he stands, and then the way he, and then they cut to the thing flying and knocking the guy in the back of the head, and then with Batman and Robin both, when they punch the screen and that snapping sound, that every time. And then you see you see a flash, and the guy goes flying, and that I think is really effective and really, really cool. It's one of the hallmarks of these fight scenes, and it's something that I thought was really inventive.
I absolutely agree that the boomerang, to me, that is like. You know how you said you don't remember specific episodes until you just watched them recently? The boomerang throw was something that always stuck with me. Yep. Whenever I'd even think about the show years later, I'd be like, oh yeah, the way Robin would always check his boomerang.
Right, and the interstitials too, where the scene changed. The segue where maybe Batman's face would go across the screen and go dun dun.
Yep. And
sometimes it would be that bat that flies toward the screen. Sometimes it was just Batman's head floating across the screen. Those are also really well done, very effective.
Yep. And it's during this fight we get our second reverse R.
Yeah, there you go. I love it. Yeah.
But in the end, Penguin is caught.
Right.
But the crime they suspected he would commit happens while they're transporting him to Gordon. So he's done nothing wrong. So he's now planning on suing them.
Right. Yeah. Which is right out of the Batman pilot. I mean, I know again that these are not things that are necessarily. It's not like they're the only ones who. I'm sure that there are Batman comics that did the same thing, where Batman is in trouble because of false arrest and. They make a thing out of it. But I couldn't help it, especially since I was looking for the 66 connections. And I have no idea whether the writers, were paying attention to the show specifically or whether they just thought to do it. But to me, it was right out of High Diddle Riddle, where they come in, they swoop in mistakenly, arrest the Riddler or try to, and the next thing you know, Batman's going to lose everything because of false arrest.
Right. Well, Penguin's also in the series threatened to sue. There was
that's true.
The
Yes.
3 parts with Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, when they falsely arrest him while he's making the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true too. Yes.
Yeah. So that's the whole hook for getting them in. But yeah. But there are just certain beats here, and including the next one that's coming up, that just feels right out of the show, because the next morning, the two then spot a classified ad in the paper with an old joke about it raining, what was it, dogs and poodles or cats and poodles, something like that?
It was stepping into a poodle.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the joke in a little montage is repeated in a variety of ways throughout the day to Batman.
Yeah. Hey, Batman, in case you missed it. Hey, Batman. Hey, over here. Right here, Batman. Here's a joke.
Yeah.
Poodle. Poodles are performing dogs, right?
Right, performing dogs. The Joker's planning a circus caper.
Negative, Robin. No circus in town. Look, what performer's name is like a type of dog?
Barry Beagle, a cornball comic.
Yes, and hasn't he got a Peruvian pearl collection worth a fortune?
Check. He must be the Joker's pigeon.
Let's grab the Joker before he makes off with the pearls.
And they head, again, without much probable cause, head out to Joker's last known hideout, which we'll also see, just like Penguin's, it's a house made of cards.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. I absolutely love it. His lair, and again, I think, it's, last known address, that house over, down that dark road that looks like a gigantic house of playing cards. Why don't we go there first? Why do we even wait for them to show up for the crime? Why don't we go over to Joker's house? Hey, maybe we ought to go to Joker's house. You think? Yeah, let's go to Joker's house. Let's see what's going on over there. Maybe he's home. Yeah, exactly.
And another bat fight breaks out.
Get here, my merry men! Crime is no laughing matter, Joker.
Joker is quickly caught.
Who's laughing now, Joker?
You'll regret this, dynamic duo. Let's go, Joker. Maybe you can make Commissioner Gordon laugh.
And again, the pearls were taken while they were transporting Joker. And since he did nothing wrong, they have to let him go.
Yeah, I have to say that they really came in with a bang on this, because this actually is a setup that really is right out of 1966. And if you watch it, you could just imagine how frustrated Adam West and Burt Ward would be.
Right.
Just like they would be just like eating their hearts out. Just what is going on? They would be completely flummoxed. And when both of them acted, the actors, whenever their characters called for them to act really frustrated or flummoxed, it was great comedy, because as we've talked about many times, Robin on the TV show, the live action show, was half the time was like a mad dog, who had to be pulled back on the leash. He was like out of his mind. Batman's role was to be the more, deliberate and, well, no, hold on, Robin, we can't go off, yada, yada, yada. But then when he would get frustrated, it was even funnier, because nothing was supposed to get to him. He was supposed to be cool at all times. So when this starts to play out, and of course as a viewer where this is going, but to watch them it was one of those things that I thought, this setup is actually a really good setup for the live action show.
Commissioner, we're charging the Joker with plotting to steal Barry Beagle's Peruvian pearl collection.
Excuse me, Batman. Hello? Yes? What? You sure? Yes, of course. We'll get on it right away. That was comedian Barry Beagle. He has just been robbed of his Peruvian pearl collection.
Just now?
Holy, perfect alibi. Carl Crusader, you are in big trouble. He's right, Batman. I'm sorry. The Penguin and the Joker turned the dynamic duo into a dopey duet. Gee whiz, Batman, how did we goof?
Forget it, Robin. I know now what's been going on.
Batman, you have arrested 2 men for crimes they couldn't have committed.
Oh, but I think they could. And did, Commissioner. And I'm going to prove it. Come on, Robin.
What does Batman have in mind? Can he prove that the Penguin and the Joker did commit those crimes? We'll know in just a few minutes, so stay tuned.
They're new. They're authentic. They're the fastest miniature metal cars you've ever seen. New Hot Wheels, only from Mattel. California custom-style cars with power bulges, torsion bar suspensions, chrome engines, red stripe racing slicks. New Hot Wheels. There's more. Collect them by themselves or get them in action sets with special track and accessories. So you can race them or stunt them. Choose from the strip action set, the drag race action set, the stunt action set, the hot curves race action set. New Hot Wheels, only from Mattel, the fastest miniature metal cars you've ever seen.
Now, in the Batcave beneath stately Wayne Manor, Batman reveals to Robin how they were tricked by their arch enemies.
You see, Robin, the whole thing is based on each criminal's modus operandi, or method of operation. Now, Penguin always used umbrellas, right?
Right, and the Joker always uses old jokes.
Right. Now, suppose they switch styles, Robin.
Then we'd be chasing the wrong man each time.
Correct again, chum. So they could each be guilty, but of the other villain's crime, right?
Holy switcheroo! How do we prove it?
I've got a plan. To the Batmobile.
Yeah, no, it's a good setup for the live-action show. But, and here's where I have a problem, I guess. I don't know, if you're going to do it as 2 parts, why not end part 1 on a cliffhanger, like a real cliff? Because this one and the next episode we do, it's the same thing when they introduce Mr. Freeze. We will get a death trap. We will get some sort of a cliffhanger death trap, but it's in the middle of part 2.
Yeah, they didn't. Well, remember, these were not paced.
Right.
Like the TV show. I mean, there were a lot of, again, that's the thing you have to remember, is that for starters, it wasn't the show. It was a cartoon. Yeah. They weren't making it to be like 66. 66 clearly had its influences, but it had its own thing. Now, I do know that, with the comic book years later, there were certain tropes that they kind of had to work around. Whether they had any limitations or cared back in 1969, 68 when these were being produced all that time, I'm not really sure that they were thinking of that or whether they just were thinking about the commercial break.
Right.
And maybe they didn't want it to be exactly like the show. Maybe the writing wasn't just as crisp. Some of those things that and again, this is where I had to caution myself in watching these now, is that a lot of the stuff you worked as a kid, and now you see these not only just plot holes, but quality holes that are much, much more glaring. Because the difference between animation made in the late 60s and animation made now is that most of the animation made now, you can watch it as an adult. They're made on multiple levels. You can enjoy them as a kid, excuse me, but you can also watch them as an adult and enjoy. And I'm not talking about just adventure stuff. I'm talking about all of it. And they've made it very. Most of the smart animation that's made today it works on multiple levels. Back then, they weren't thinking that way at all. They were not. They did not think that an adult was going to walk in the room, sit down, and start poring over the nuances of the cartoon. They were just making kiddie fare.
Sure. Yeah. I know. It's funny because it's like then it ends with end of part 1 where Batman's like, no, I've got it figured out. And Ted Knight, what is it? Stay tuned. It just kind of reminded me then of like season 3 Batman where it was just this sort of okay. I mean, granted, it's just a commercial break also. That's right. We're going to be back.
Right, exactly. It's not like remember the cliffhangers were done not only just as a satirical part of and kind of an homage to old serials, which the show was also based on. But remember, it wasn't. You're not coming back the next day.
Right.
It's not an inducement to come back the next day, and which was part of why they did it, but also part of the joke. Here, there's, it's a commercial. They'll come back. And also, there is supposed to be some of the suspense. I figured it out. And it's like, well, you, viewer, have you figured it out? And so now Johnny and Jane can turn to each other. You know what's going on? I don't know. You know what's going on? That sort of thing.
Yeah. And so Batman comes up with a plan. At Joker's hideout, the two are watching television to see if there's any news of Batman, and they see a report about the belt that was stolen for Penguin is fake. So they start arguing, and we get the whole... It's like almost like Cesar Romero and Burgess Meredith again, though, right up close to each other and stuff, and we see that they get a little violent with each other. And Joker's got his gas, but Penguin's got a knife in the tip of his umbrella.
I love it. I also love the whole one-upmanship of that scene, which is, again, it's meant to be. It is meant to be funny, even for kids. I think the idea that they each anticipated each other's move in. Well, I removed this, and I put this in here, and that, yes, it's actually a pretty funny scene, and classic Gotham City logic.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and I meant Strangers on a Train, not Dial M for Murder, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Just correcting the record.
So Penguin gets the last word, so to speak, as he gasses Joker with a poison gas. He gets away as Batman and Robin burst in. So the two have to get Joker to the hospital. And what a coincidence. An ambulance is there. They said they saw Batman and started following him. And he's like, okay, citizen, take him away, get him to the hospital.
Yeah, and you know this is going to go bad real fast. And it does.
So they go heading back after Penguin. They reach the sporting goods company. And you know how you say, there's some cheap animation. And then there are moments where it's like the scene with the two of them being electrocuted. I love the glow around them, just the whole lighting and the shading and stuff.
Yeah, they had their moments. I mean, these guys were pros. It's just that they were doing it in such rapid fashion, and there were so many shortcuts, and there were definitely some things. But then there are also, the matte paintings are also really cool. There's another scene in one that we'll get to in a different episode that I made note of. But a lot of the matte paintings are really, really good. So even though whenever they drive down the road, you're seeing the Guggenheim Museum repeated constantly. You're also, a lot of the backgrounds and a lot of the images are actually really, really well done.
Yeah. So when they wake up, they are in the death trap. And I did like this one, that they're there chained to a batting cage, and they've got to keep hitting the balls before any of them connect and activate electricity that will kill them. Yeah,
that's a worthy Batman 66 trap.
Yeah.
Because it's so over the top, it's so silly, but it's also it is tense. It works. They're going to get out of it, but it's a good one. You can imagine just how exhausting that would be. And if you've ever been in a batting cage, and you know how hard it is to do what they're doing, and not to project or anything, but it's true. It's an effective device, but it also keeps with the idea of a death trap that's themed to whatever the crime spree is.
Right.
So it's that definitely is right out of the 66 show. I mean, there's no question that these writers were influenced by it. There's none at all. It's just whether or not it translates as well, or sometimes actually in some cases, as I've noted before, that the show, if you're looking at it as an adventure show, there are times that it's actually better. And I could think of some specific examples that we'll get to in other episodes. But there are elements of this show that are actually better in terms of for sheer entertainment value than 66, particularly some of the slower episodes on 66. But yeah, this is like right out of a 19. This is like a second season trap.
Yeah, no, I agree. The thing I like about it also, some really good dialogue.
Sooner or later, one of you will miss. And in this game, one strike and you're out. Farewell.
Don't try for power. Just meet the ball.
Can't keep up much longer. Holy fastball.
Robin, drive one into machine. Now. Good hit. Now let's get out of these shackles and go after Penguin.
Yes, I know that's so funny, but I mean, I was struck by that too. I was like, wow, so whoever the writer is, he definitely knows baseball.
And at one point, one of the swings Batman takes, he's not wearing his crest.
Yeah, well, is it the one where it's just the yellow bat, or was it just nothing there at all?
There was just nothing there at all.
Okay, so there's one where the bat on his chest. And I wish it happened so quickly, where it wasn't even a circle. It was just a bat, but the bat was yellow. And I thought, that actually looks kind of cool.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one yet, but
yeah.
So they get out, they capture Penguin, they head to Gordon's office, and they get a call from Joker, and he tells Batman that the ambulance was his men, and they rescued him. So, and he tells him that the pearls Penguin got for him were fake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they just again the way they taunt each other, the way they screw with each other is also very 1966.
Yeah, definitely. Now here's a bit where again, and I like these little bits. It's just quick. It's a throwaway line, and it's fine for, especially considering the brevity of the cartoon and everything. They work out where Joker's hiding out based on the clay on the tires of the ambulance that Robin noticed as well.
I knew you were going to mention that. I'm like, John's going to mention this because this is your jam.
Yeah.
This is like the Joker's utility belt episode where he notices the coloring of the cork.
Yeah.
So he knew that the vintage was off and that the whole thing was, so he came prepared. But that is ripped right out of. I mean, yeah, they do that in the comics too. Even today, it's like Batman will come up with some fiber that could only be, even one of my all-time favorite Batman comic book stories, and I talked about it on a different podcast, where Batman is able to track down Ra's al Ghul based on the beadwork of a camel bridle that he found in a Himalayan, in Ra's al Ghul's Himalayan lair, led him to believe that he was going to a specific part of the Sahara. I mean, that kind of fakakta logic is, frankly, is what makes comic books work, and it's also what makes people want to make fun of comic books like the 66 show, or fun with it at the very least.
Right. So they head to the construction site where they catch Joker as he tries to get away on a bulldozer by using a bat bomb.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
And the ending is it's cute. I mean, the two of them are locked up in the same cell. They don't realize it at first till the dividing wall is lifted away.
It's all the Penguin's fault. I never want to see that bird-brained buzzard again.
That double-crossing, pitiful road company Pagliacci, he did this to me. Unfunny, witless, slapstick, bungling.
This has got to be the funniest comedy act I've ever seen.
The idea that they would screw at them to that degree, that they're complaining about each other in separate rooms, and then it's revealed that they lift the wall. It's a fake wall. I mean, why would they even have that built? I mean, where did that even come from? And then, the joke's on you, you two, you wacky guys. You're now going to have to, I don't know. And of course, Batman, Robin, and Commissioner are basically taunting them which is another favorite thing that they used to do in these cartoons. They throw the villain in jail and then taunt them from behind bars, which is great.
Yeah. I don't know if Warden Crichton would approve, though.
No, it's not part of his progressive penal, policies.
Yeah. Now, I will say, okay, this was a strong episode. This was a good one. It was a good way to start with two main characters you recognize, two main villains. It's really good. It's off to a strong start.
It is, and it also is a reminder, again, the difference. First off, the fact that they only have practically like 5 voice actors, and they're all doing all the different voices, and you can hear it too, which is again, part of the charm. You don't have to worry about actors, their availability. You don't have to worry about whether Burgess Meredith is off doing a guest star, starring stint on some other thing, or maybe he's in a movie over here. You can run whatever characters you want to put in. You can put in. Now, of course, they're going to use the Penguin and the Joker and the Riddler and Catwoman and Mr. Freeze. The most popular characters from the TV series. They're going to use these guys. They're not. That's again another influence on the show has on these versus what the comic books had on these. Yeah. Because of the use of the characters and the fact that there were a lot more to choose from in the comics. They definitely went back to the go-to villains on the TV show. So right off the bat, you get a Penguin Joker team up, and how special was that when it was during live action. Of course, it was a huge deal. You had a 3-parter with the two of them teaming up. You had the movie. There were other things. Usually, if one of the, right, I think every time, if a villain teamed up with another villain on the show, other than the Joker, Penguin, it was always with a secondary made for TV villain. Penguin, Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, Riddler and the Siren briefly. That sort of thing would happen, on the show more often simply because of the actors, availability. So here you get that treat of, all right, you see a team up just because they can.
Yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah, I do too. And it's off to a good start. It's then, and here's the thing. I like this second story. I just wish it wasn't the second story here, because we just had Penguin, and he's back again.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I in watching it, these episodes are not actually paired up. Like I have it on iTunes. I have it on download. I have it on disc somewhere too, but I don't know how they're paired up on the disc.
They're mixed up.
Yeah, on the iTunes, these two were not paired together. There's a different pairing. So, as often is the case back in the day, you'd see something and maybe it was the production order versus the airing order. So when we were talking about doing this and you're looking at the air date list that from various sources on the internet, I was kind of surprised that they had a Joker Penguin episode and then a Penguin episode. I was like, well, that's kind of odd, but maybe they just figured let's just go all in with the villains that everybody knows, or they, again, a lot of times we think they're thinking about things and they're making these things like a factory and they just throw stuff up. I mean, it's not uncommon even today when shows that are actually serials, cartoons like Star Wars, Clone Wars, I think had this happen where it's actually a story that they're telling. And they'd run episodes out of order because some schmo over at the network wasn't paying attention to the air date order, or for who knows what reason that they did it in a certain way. So yeah, it is kind of awkward. And the second Penguin episode is okay, but you're right. It's like I just saw the Penguin. I'd rather see somebody else.
Yeah. It's funny you're reminding me now because I've been also rewatching the Marvel superheroes ones from '66 with Iron Man, Hulk, Captain America, and them, and I've been. It's funny because the same thing. The fourth episode, after 3 episodes of Cap in World War II, fourth episode, Cap's in New York, now with Rick Jones. The fifth episode is actually the Avengers story where they find Cap. It's not flashback. Cap, yeah. It's just they did it out of order.
Yeah, they just didn't care. Yeah. That's the thing, is that they did not care. They were not paying attention. And this is the problem with a lot of animation from that period, is that a lot of these shows were written down to children. Mm-hmm. And they figured kids aren't going to care. Well, kids did care. I would remember this sort of thing, and it would drive me crazy. And it was, I think that it wasn't really, through the 80s there were definite improvements, but it really wasn't until Batman the Animated Series was what totally changed everything. Particularly in terms of adventure cartoons, it completely remade everything, and so that really is the dividing line. And so when you see what was done before that and what was done after that, it's night and day. And part of it is the carelessness. And I know that there are definitely issues with that show in terms of air dates, and they ran things out of order in terms of the production order too. But they weren't serials. That's not true. There were elements that definitely developed as the show went on, so that there was some continuity. But it wasn't a serial. With these, I think they just was all right. Hit play. All right, that's what they put on there. Maybe at the network when they decided to run these, because these were on CBS originally on network, maybe they were like, well, the kids like the Penguin and the Joker. I don't want that one with so and so. Let's just put it on. Okay, let's do it.
Right.
Returning from a charity ball, Batman and Robin in true identities drive through Gotham Park when suddenly, watch out, Bruce!
If it ain't millionaire Bruce Wayne and his ward, Dick Grayson.
What do you men want?
Can't you guess, Moneybags?
You will not succeed this time, my fine feathered finks.
The Penguin!
Take that.
Oh!
And that.
Oh, that's got it!
And that. finished.
Thanks to the Penguin. But I don't get it. Since when did you start catching crooks?
Mr. Wayne, I am a reformed man, making amends for past misdeeds. And what better way to do it than by aiding the doves of law against the hawks of crime?
That oily bird must be up to something.
Yes, but what?
To the nearest jail, if you please, Mr. Wayne.
In any event, the second episode in this, it's the short one, it's the one part, it's called A Bird Out of Hand. It was written by George Cashton. He was another regular writer, along with Dennis Marks, on this and also The Adventures of Superman and Aquaman as well.
Yeah, he was a DC editor. I mean, they did. Yeah, you would see some of the names from the DC writing crew. Like Bob Haney wrote a lot of these too. I'm not sure how many he wrote on Batman specifically, but he wrote a lot of the earlier episodes, and he's a DC mainstay, legend. So unlike now where rarely the twain shall meet,
right.
They were much more involved back then.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and this is the same thing in the comic books that they've kind of really written into the character, is him always. There's a theme with him, like pretending that he's a good guy, and that's part of his scheme.
Yeah.
And they play again with it here, and it's actually almost like a cliche. It's like and of course when you're watching these, even as a kid, you know that that's not true. You know that he's still a bad guy. So I kind of wonder why they kept going back to that well. But it is a little tiresome, and that was one of the things in watching this, is that there's some fun parts of this segment, but. Again, with the Penguin, can we get on with it already? Was sort of my attitude.
Right. Well, it moves along, this one, because, then we cut to Batman and Robin arriving at Gordon's office. They find out it's all true. We get a quick reverse R scene as well from Robin here. We then get a little montage of Penguin stopping various crimes and Batman not believing any of it.
I don't get it, Penguin. All those captured cons are working for you?
Precisely. And each is carrying a tiny chicken feather like this one. Once inside Gotham Pen, they will spring some of the world's greatest criminals, who will then join forces with me.
Boy, Penguin, you are a genius.
Now, did you notice the whole time he was speaking about this situation, the background music was from the Superman series?
No, I didn't notice. I didn't pick up.
It's very subtle, but it's there. It's Superman, not theme music, but it's Superman incidental music.
Well, that would make sense. I mean, they had the library. They said, "Okay, I need this kind of music," so they'd pick the. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh no, I know. It just sort of stood out here, considering it's Batman, Superman. But again, yeah, you're right, because. As in the Filmation series in the 70s, there's Star Trek music that you see in Shazam and ISIS and so on. So
there is Spider-Man music that shows up in NFL films, and some of this stuff actually, which is great, you can actually get on iTunes if you know the names of the cuts. A lot of this stuff you can actually find because it's public domain music that was actually written and designed to be used as background music. And there are, of course, because the internet is a wonderful thing, there are even, you could find out, well, this music was used on The Fugitive, and this music was used on Mission Impossible, and this music was used, in Mission Impossible and Star Trek would share some music, I think. Because they were using a public domain library at the time, music that was created specifically for that kind of usage. So it only goes to follow that they were using whatever library was available to them, as they were making these.
Right. So the Bat computer also works it out that this is the situation with Penguin. So Batman and Robin head to the penitentiary where the crooks work on getting out. The explosions start happening.
Before the guards recover! Hold it! Look up ahead! The Batmobile!
And it's pretty cool. The Batmobile circles around them, creates a thick smoke, so there's all this confusion.
Work fast, Robin.
And a bat fight breaks out.
Here come the guards!
Batman, look! One of them's getting away.
Good. He's the one who's going to lead us to the Penguin's hideout.
it's got nothing to do with anything, but because Penguin likes birds, that he's got his henchmen dressed up as eagles.
Yeah,
which has nothing to do with penguins. I guess they were just looking for bird costumes. I would have preferred they wearing all black and the black bowler hats.
Right.
But these eagle outfits are so ridiculous that it's kind of funny.
Yeah. Now, one of the guys does manage to escape in all the confusion, and Batman lets him go, says we'll follow him back to Penguin's hideout. Now, the thing is, doesn't he know where the hideout is?
Yes, because it's that gigantic nest with the trapdoor roof that's over on that peak, whatever mountain peak there is near Gotham City or in Gotham City. There it is.
Yeah. And not only that, just to make absolutely certain, somehow or another, in all the confusion, he also slipped a transmitter in the guy.
Yeah, and it's like it's like the size of a cube.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, did you not notice this big bulky box that was in your chest pocket? It's awesome.
Oh my gosh. So, but one thing we do get to see here, we get to see the Batplane.
Yeah. And it's, again, that's where you get to, because of the quote unquote, no budget, you don't have to have a Batcave, you don't have to have a Batplane set, or you don't have to build a Batplane. Here you get to use the Batplane, and it's cool. And it's one of those differences, they're not using the TV show designs, but they are using the color scheme. They're using the black and orange color scheme.
Yep.
They do have the more traditional, logo on the front as opposed to the 66, vehicle logo that they would use for the, like the bat on the Batmobile, for example. But yeah, it looks cool too. I mean, in the comics, when they used the Batplane, it was usually blue or black or whatever, blue black. But the black and orange, I think it just looks cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the Batplane hovers over the nest. Batman lowers himself down through the trapdoor you were talking about, and he's quickly trapped inside by the steel strands of the nest that are able to,
close in on him.
And I thought that was actually cool.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And what I like about what comes up next is we get one of those really cool looking matte paintings when Batman tells Robin, come put the Batplane's afterburners on this thing.
Yeah.
Let's melt this thing so I can get out. Of course, that would kill him, but it looks really cool when Robin does that, because the effect that they use is really cool.
Yeah, no, I agree. That whole, and just the angle of the plane against
it looks really good.
It's really good. There's one odd thing though, is that Penguin gives Batman a chance to escape by saying, "If you just leave me alone, I'll let you go."
Yeah, right. Well, that's yeah, exactly. Yeah, sure.
But, that's not going to happen. Batman gets out. They get in the plane. They chase after Penguin, who is in his flying umbrella with his men. And
the aerodynamic flying umbrella. If only they'd used the ones that they used in the movie, which actually looked awesome. Where where they ride the umbrellas that look like little tiny little jet planes.
Right.
Here it's open and they're sitting in it like it's a bowl, and how it's moving around, I have no idea, but. Yeah.
But, overall, not a bad little story. My only problem with it is just the placement of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. It's all right. It's fun. Yeah. Like most of these are, it's fun.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we wrap this up, I just wanted to take a moment, because you did bring this up, and I want to sort of focus on them a moment, the voice actors for the show. It primarily focuses on three, in particular, Ted Knight as our narrator, and also the guy who does most of the voices of the villains.
Yes. Well, you have Olan Sewell, who did Batman. You have Casey Kasem, who did Robin. Mm-hmm. And Ted Knight. I think Larry Storch is the one, I think, who does the Joker. Isn't that right? I think so.
I don't know. That I'm not sure of. Yeah.
Yeah. And Ted Knight does. And it was always great whenever you'd hear Ted Knight either playing the police dispatcher or playing, even better, a newscaster. Because now I'm hearing Ted Baxter. Now because he doesn't really disguise his voice, he's kind of more straightforward. So now I'm hearing Ted Baxter tell Batman and Robin what's going on, which is awesome. But he's great, and he's doing Alfred, trying to do an English accent, which he really can't do. But then again, it is really part of the charm of these things, because you hear those voices and they're indelibly Filmation. It's one of the things that really makes it stand out. I mean, I know they did voice work elsewhere, but hearing Ted Knight's voice is great.
Yeah. And just one thing to correct, the name's Olan Soule.
Is it Soule?
Yeah.
I wondered about that. Okay.
I did for the longest time too, but recently I heard an episode of Dragnet, the radio drama from the 1950s, and Soule was a regular on both the radio show and then the 60s TV show, semi-regular. He was one of the CSI guys.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for correcting me, because I wasn't quite sure, but I'm glad to know that. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I'm it sounds weird. I'm a bit of an Olan Soule fan.
That's okay. I'm a big Jackson Beck fan, and his voice work shows up on these cartoons too.
Well, see, what's amazing about this is that for the longest time I didn't realize who Olan Soule was. I knew he was the voice, and I called him Olan Soule too when I saw the credits and stuff.
Yeah.
And what happened was that I'm watching the $6 Million Man pilot movie, and at one point there's this mousy little guy who turns around to Rudy Wells.
How's it going? You know, Doctor, what this is impossible. I mean, a man loses an eye. Who can make him a new eye to see out of? And now, look here.
Because they're commenting about the bionics he's developing. He's like, this is an amazing eye. And I'm like going, my God, he sounds like Batman. And then at the end, you see the credit, and you're like, he is Batman. That little mousy man is, and he is. He's this small framed guy with glasses. He's the nebbish looking guy, but he carries such force that whenever he speaks, suddenly he doesn't look as nebbish anymore.
It's funny because you are that almost word for word is what Scheimer said about him in the book. His voice isn't anything what you would think he would look like. And yet he's got this great voice. And it is a great Batman voice. There is a lot of fun to hear Burt Ward and Dick Grayson. Burt Ward and Adam West in the 77 Filmation. Mm-hmm. But their performances, particularly Adam West, and there was some criticism of this, of course, in the 66 movie, that the animated movie, where there was also an issue, of course, where their voices had aged, particularly Adam West's, not so much with Burt Ward, was that I think that their delivery in the cartoon, just to make one comparison in 77, was more mannered. It never was as effective to me to actually hear them as Burt Ward, or hear them as Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson, as it actually is to hear Olan Soule and Casey Kasem, who actually were better voice actors.
Yeah.
And I think that they were professional voice actors. They knew what they were doing. They weren't just stepping in because they were, for the obvious reasons. And I think that that's part of what makes these, and you were asking me earlier, what's the difference between 68 and 70, or 69, I should say 69. What's the difference between 69 and 77 is that very issue, is the fact that it's one of those things that makes it's not just Batmite, but I actually do prefer Olan Soule and Casey Kasem in this particular scenario to Adam West and Burt Ward.
Yeah, I got to agree. And not only just
they're pros,
not just the 77 Batman cartoon, but then a few years later when Adam West got to be Batman on the Super Friends, I actually remember being annoyed.
It's actually distracting. Yeah, it's distracting.
I was happy that they managed to find him a role, because then he becomes Martin Stein, the half of Firestorm, who's another favorite character of mine. But I just was like, no, as much as I love Adam, no, this was Olan's role. He should be Batman in the Super Friends.
Yeah, it sounds that way. And when you talk about the voices also, well, no, you know what? I'll save it. Never mind. I'll wait till the appropriate episode.
Okay. Yep. All right, then. So, as we come to the end of this episode, Dan, just take a moment here. 13th Dimension, what's happening over there? And also, by the time this episode airs, we're going to be getting ready for East Coast Comic Con, aren't we?
Yes, that's true. My old pal Cliff Galbraith has another show coming up. It'll be at the end of April, the last weekend in April, in northern New Jersey, just across from New York City. He has a great lineup this year. He has a great lineup. Yeah. This is the best lineup yet, easily. He and I have been talking about that. But for the purposes of your listeners, the kind of things that they'd be interested in, besides comic book guests, is that there's going to be a Lost in Space reunion there. Scheduled guests, Billy Mummy and Mark Goddard is they're going to be there, and I think a couple of the other cast members are going to have the Chariot.
Yep.
Will be there too. I'm hoping for the robot, but I don't think that's going to happen. Although the show also always has a Batmobile and other Bat vehicles, usually a Monkey Mobile. So if you're into that sort of thing and you're in the New York area, I highly recommend the show. Going to the show. It's a great show, and it's East Coast Comic-Con, and you can get tickets now. Over 13th Dimension, by the time this airs, I have no idea what we're going to have on the website that day. But we always have a lot of Batman stuff. I mean, I've never sat down to figure it out, but I would probably say of all the stories that I write, I would say at least half are Batman stories, all things considered. I'm always writing about 66. I'm always writing about different versions of Batman. So if you've never checked out the site, please do, because we've got some stuff. And, we do a lot of, current stuff, but also a friend of mine, dubbed us retro cool. And that's a term I embrace. So we a lot of stuff that we do is old school stuff that your listeners would be into.
Mm-hmm. And that's over at the number 13, THDimension, all one word, .com.
Yep, 13thdimension.com.
So, folks, that's going to do it for this episode of the Batcave Podcast. Tune in 2 weeks' time when we'll be back looking at the second episode from the Batman 69 cartoon series featuring Mr. Freeze and the Joker in 2 stories.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool. So until then, folks, thank you so much for listening. Once again, Citizens Dan, take care, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks for listening, chums. I don't have a bat phone, but you can contact the Batcave Podcast through its Facebook page, Twitter, email at thebatcavepodcast@gmail.com. Subscribe to the podcast via Libsyn.com. That's LIBSYN.com. Or through iTunes. The Batcave Podcast is part of a series of pop culture podcasts from the Chronic Rift Network. Find them at chronicrift.com. So until next time, citizens, sane bat time, sane Batcave Podcast.